This is the Silmarillion PODFIC of Ainur Corp and Holdings Inc. by Solitary Bird. This fic is rated G, with some references to alcoholism. Everyone is invited to the launch party for Ainur Corp and Holding Inc.'s successful launch of the Secondborn project. There's a buffet and bad music, and definitely not the specter of the former head of sales hovering over everyone. It is what it is. Aule, really? Again? Shrieked Vice President Manwe. The wine glass in his hand shook, either with shock or rage, and the bubbling liquid sloshed back and forth dangerously. Why not? Tulkas, head of security, laughed, leaning back in his chair. This buffet, put on by Ainur Corp and Holdings, was a thank you to the staff for finally bringing the embattled Secondborn project to full completion. It acted like a less formal in-house launch party, and it was incredibly boring. Someone had made the unfortunate decision for the event's music to be in the control of Namo from the legal department, which meant that everyone was now being tortured by royalty-free music. If Aule wanted to turn up looking like one of his weird solo projects, he was welcome to do so in Tulkas' eyes. It beat him moping around the place in a firstborn hurrah. As much as Tulkas liked to roast him for his unusual choices, he did actually care a lot about Aule being happy. The vice president had just clung on to this non-issue because there were issues in the company that were out of upper management's control, issues that the rest of the company was sitting around eating cold pizza and pointedly not talking about. What missing colleague? What hostile takeover attempt? Have you seen the chicken vol au vent, Nessa? Tulkas isn't sure whether nights like this where Manwe decides to rewrite the uniform policy because he doesn't like Aule's style, or nights where he gets absolutely paralytic on wine spritzers and cried about his brother for 4 hours before his wife came and got him, are worse. Tonight was looking to be a mixture of the two. Tulkas had spent the past 3 hours distracting the vice president away from Aule whenever their conversations started getting too personal, and by extension, too heated. Unfortunately, that had led to Manwe doing entirely too many shots with Orome. Tulkas met Varda at the bar by accident. They both had come over with the same intention of asking the bartender to cut him off before a serious problem happened. "Thanks for your help," Varda said, moving closer to him as she received the 2 lemonades she'd ordered. "I'm finished talking with Vire now. I can take over." "He's not doing very well, is he?" Tulkas asked. He already knew the answer, of course, but all those unsaid things were too painful to not say any more. The data breach just before the launch, really, I don't think he slept the entire 3 days it took to lock everything down and find out where they got in. Manwe was sitting at a table far enough away from the dance floor that most of the employees couldn't see him, holding another half-empty champagne flute loosely in one hand, staring at the buffet tables vacantly. In front of him, the table was littered with empty glasses. The plate of food Ivana had made up for him at some point sat abandoned and untouched. "You know Myron stole a shipment of Secondborn from the manufacturing facility before it got to the distribution centre in Indore, don't you?" she asked. Tulkas winced. He definitely had not known that. Was that what they were looking for? Irmo and IT think so. They managed to steal a lot of the Secondborn information before we could prevent them. They tried to get information on the Firstborn project too, but IT thinks most of what they managed to get was thankfully corrupted data. That's at least some comfort, I suppose. She took a sip of her lemonade and sighed. Melkor really did a number on us this time. Them being brothers just makes the corporate espionage all the worse. Melkor's sudden departure from the company he'd helped build with them all had been upsetting for everyone. He'd been one of their biggest innovators, and he had led the sales department impeccably for years. When he'd founded his own company with what seemed like the sole purpose of destroying Ainur Corp and Holdings Inc., the shock of it had left them all scrambling. Angband LLC had a lot to answer for. The hostile takeover, the continuous attempts to hack into their servers, and the continued attempts to poach employees were just some of them. Losing Myron to his side had been devastating. He'd been instrumental in the second stage of the Children of Iluvatar project. There was a lot of sensitive information he had been privy to. "How's Aule taken it?" Varda asked him, and Tulkas merely shrugged. "It's hard to tell. They were very close at one point. There were rumours that they were a thing, but then Aule met Yavanna and they kind of drifted apart after that. Yavanna said to me that he's kept Myron stationed down at Forge exactly the same as it was when he left. I think at the moment, though, Aule's more concerned about Fionaro's head injury from slamming his head off the roller door and how much time that's going to add onto the Silmarillion project. It's already been delayed 3,000 years later than originally planned. Hopefully we can weed out the rogue elements that are still in his department for him, and he can get back to normal production ASAP. Varda left with a chaste kiss to his cheek and a roll of her eyes as she saw Aule being badgered by her husband and Ermor. Both were drunk as a skunk, and Aule looked like he wanted nothing more than to sink into the floor. It was a little sad frown that enraged Tulkas enough to abandon his own drinks at the bar and rush in to help. Because Aule was a weirdo, but he was Tulkas's weirdo friend that only he was ever allowed to bully. Also, Aule was the only member of staff that remembered to send any correspondence in dyslexic-friendly fonts and didn't laugh when he needed to count things using his fingers. The end. Thank you for listening.